The guardhouse was sitting in the middle of my road when I came home. Not beside it, not near it, in the middle of it. I had been gone for 6 days, helping my mother after a surgery 2 states away. I was tired, behind on work, and thinking about nothing except getting home, checking the well house, and making sure the back pasture gate had not blown open in the wind. Then I turned onto the private gravel road my father had built 30 years earlier, and my truck headlights hit fresh concrete. At first I thought somebody had parked construction equipment across the lane. Then I saw the booth. It had a small roof, dark-tinted windows, a metal barrier arm, 2 security cameras, fresh wiring, orange cones, and a polished sign bolted to the side. "Silver Ridge West Security Entrance!" I stopped my truck in the road and just stared. Behind the booth, 3 contractor trucks were parked where my hay trailer usually turned around. A worker in a reflective vest was running cable through a trench. Another man was installing a keypad, and on the right side of the road, someone had planted a decorative stone marker that said, "Future Resident Access." Future Resident Access. On my road. That road did not belong to Silver Ridge. It did not belong to the HOA. It did not belong to their developer, their security company, their future residents, or anyone holding a clipboard with a logo on it. It was my private road, inside my deed, built and maintained by my family, leading to my barn, my well house, my pasture, and the back half of my property. The HOA had only a limited access easement across a short section of it. Limited. That word mattered. It meant they could pass under certain conditions. It did not mean they could build. It did not mean they could control. It did not mean they could install a guardhouse and make me register to drive to my own barn. A security guard stepped out of the booth and asked for my name. I asked him who authorized construction. He said, "Silver Ridge HOA. Then Karen arrived. She pulled up in her white SUV with the confidence of someone who had already decided my property rights were an inconvenience. Behind her came a developer representative in a navy vest, holding rolled plans under his arm. Karen smiled at the guardhouse, like she had unveiled a monument. She said Silver Ridge West was an $11 million expansion, and the new controlled entrance was necessary for community safety. I told her this was my road. She said the HOA had access rights. I said they had passage rights, not construction rights. She told me the board had approved the improvement, permits were being handled, and the road was being modernized for the benefit of the entire community. Then she handed me a form, a resident access sticker application. For my own road, she said, "Once you register like everyone else, this won't be a problem." I did not yell. I did not ram the gate. I did not tear down the sign. I pulled out my phone and started recording, because Karen did not know that my deed had a sentence in it that would destroy everything she had built. No permanent structures, no obstruction, no security control, no expansion beyond the original easement without written consent of the grantor. And I was the grantor's successor. Within 10 days, code enforcement would post a stop work order on that guardhouse. The county would refuse to approve the entrance. The lender would freeze review of Silver Ridge West. The developer would accuse the HOA of promising access it did not own, and that $11 million expansion would die because Karen decided a board vote was stronger than a recorded deed. My father built that road with a borrowed grader and more stubbornness than money. Back then, the land behind Silver Ridge was not a subdivision. It was scrub, pasture, cedar, creek bottom, and rough soil that turned to soup after heavy rain. The county road stopped at the front line, and if you wanted to reach the back acreage, you either walked or you made your own way in. So my father made a way. He cleared brush one weekend at a time. He dug drainage ditches with equipment that broke down more often than it worked. He put in culverts by hand with 2 friends from church. He spread gravel in layers because he could never afford enough all at once. He walked that road after every storm, checking where water crossed, where ruts formed, where the slope needed help. That road was not pretty. It was not straight, but it worked. It connected the front pasture to the barn, the well house, the hayfield, and the back fence. It was how we hauled feed, moved cattle, checked the pump, brought in firewood, and got to the part of the property where my father said the land finally got quiet. After he died, maintaining that road became one of the ways I stayed connected to him. Every time I filled potholes, cleared branches, or cleaned the ditch, I could hear him explaining water flow like it was a language. Never fight water straight on, he used to say. Give it somewhere to go, or it will take what it wants. I thought about that a lot later. People are like that too, especially HOAs. Silver Ridge Estates was built on the land east of mine about 12 years ago. The developer needed temporary access during construction, and later the HOA wanted limited passage for maintenance and certain emergency situations. My father was still alive then, and he did not like the idea, but he was also practical. The agreement was narrow. That is important. The easement allowed limited, non-exclusive passage over a defined portion of the private road. It did not grant ownership. It did not allow widening. It did not allow gates. It did not allow relocation. It did not allow commercial development traffic beyond specific conditions. It did not allow permanent structures. And it absolutely did not allow the HOA to control my access. My father had those conditions written in because he knew exactly what could happen. Give a developer a path, he told me once, and someday they'll call it a road they own. For years, the easement was mostly quiet. A maintenance truck passed once in a while. An emergency vehicle used it during a storm when the main entrance flooded. A utility crew checked something near the back line. I kept track, but I did not make a fight out of every tire mark. Then small abuses became routine. Landscapers used it as a shortcut. Delivery vans followed GPS through it. Residents walked dogs down it like it was a nature trail. Teenagers drove golf carts onto it at night. One contractor left ruts so deep, I had to bring in gravel. I put up signs, private road, deeded access only, no HOA traffic. The signs helped for a while. Then Karen became HOA president. Karen liked renaming things. She called my private road the West Access Road. She called the easement a community access corridor. She called my pasture the Rural Transition Zone. She called my refusal to widen the road a growth obstacle. At first, I thought it was just language. HOA presidents love language that makes control sound like cooperation. But Karen was not just talking. She was planning Silver Ridge West, an expansion that would add new homes, new amenities, and another entrance to the community. The developer wanted a polished access point. Residents wanted security. Karen wanted credit for bringing the project together, and my road was the easiest route. The problem was legal reality. The HOA's main entrance was on the other side of the subdivision. Building a new entrance from the county road would require drainage work, grading, traffic review, and land acquisition. My road already existed. It connected exactly where they wanted the new expansion to open. So Karen began telling residents that the west access would be upgraded. I heard it secondhand at first. A neighbor forwarded me a newsletter saying Silver Ridge West would include a secure, controlled entrance along the west corridor. Another resident asked if I was selling part of the road. A contractor called me by mistake, asking where to stage security gate equipment. I emailed Karen immediately. I reminded her that the road was private. I attached the easement language. I wrote that no construction, gate, guardhouse, barrier, widening, signage, commercial traffic, or expansion access was authorized. She did not answer directly. Instead, the management company replied with a vague message, saying the HOA was reviewing infrastructure improvements consistent with existing access rights. Existing access rights. That phrase sounded harmless. It was not. Because when people want to take more than they have, they start by stretching the name of what they already hold. I should have called a lawyer then. I waited. I regret that part. I thought the recorded deed would be enough to make them cautious. I thought no contractor would build a guardhouse without checking land ownership. I thought no lender, developer, board, or permit office would let an $11 million project depend on a road the HOA did not own. But I underestimated one thing: Karen's confidence. She believed if she built first, I would adapt later. She was wrong. The guardhouse was not temporary. That was the first thing I noticed when I stepped out of my truck. Temporary looks like cones, signs, maybe a trailer. This was concrete. Bolts, electrical conduit, a trench, a mounted barrier arm, a keypad pedestal, 2 steel posts already set into fresh footings. They had not misunderstood. They had committed. I walked around the construction area, filming everything. The concrete pad sat partly across the travel lane and partly in the shoulder my father had built for turning equipment. The barrier arm blocked the road completely when lowered. The camera pole faced down my private property. The keypad was mounted where every vehicle would have to stop. A contractor asked me not to film. I asked him for the permit. He said the project manager had it. I asked for the project manager. He pointed to the developer representative standing near Karen. The representative introduced himself like we were having a business meeting, instead of standing on my land. He said Silver Ridge West had been approved for controlled access improvements. He said the guardhouse was critical infrastructure. He said security integration was part of the buyer package, and pre-lot interest depended on this entrance. I asked if he had a recorded access agreement signed by me. He looked at Karen. Karen said the easement was already in place. I told her again that the easement did not allow permanent structures. She said their attorney interpreted it differently. I asked for that interpretation in writing. She said she would not be bullied on a construction site. Then the security guard stepped between me and the booth and said the site was restricted. I laughed once, not because it was funny, but because the alternative was losing control. Restricted. On my road. I told him he was standing on private land and that his employer had no authority to restrict me. He said all access would go through the HOA system once activated. That word, activated, made my stomach drop. They were not just building a booth. They were preparing to operate it. Cameras, stickers, resident database, keypad, gate arm. They were turning my road into a controlled entrance for homes that did not even exist yet. The next morning, I returned with printed copies of the deed and easement. The barrier arm was installed. A sign had been added, Silver Ridge West, authorized access only. I found a laminated notice, zip-tied to my own fence post, warning that unauthorized interference with security infrastructure would result in legal action. I photographed it. Then Karen emailed. Her message accused me of obstructing a community safety improvement and creating delays to an $11 million expansion. She wrote that the HOA had relied on long-standing access rights and that my refusal to cooperate could expose me to damages if the project schedule was affected. Damages. For refusing to let them build on my road. The developer followed with a sharper letter. It said the west entrance was represented as available for project access, and that any sudden challenge could affect financing, buyer commitments, engineering timelines, and contractual deadlines. The letter did not directly threaten me, but it implied that if money was lost, they would look for someone to blame. Karen made it personal 2 days later. She came to the road while I was trying to reach the well house. The barrier arm was down. The guard asked for my access sticker. I told him I did not need a sticker. He radioed someone. Karen arrived with a folder and handed me the resident access application again. She said she had expedited it as a courtesy. All I needed to do was provide my vehicle information, sign the access rules, and agree not to interfere with gate operations. I looked at the form. It required me to acknowledge Silver Ridge Security Control. I asked if she understood she was asking me to request permission to use my own deeded road. She said, "This is how modern communities work. Private land has to adapt." That sentence hit harder than the guardhouse. Private land has to adapt. Not laws, not deeds, not boundaries. Land, my father's road, my access, my daily life. All of it was supposed to bend because Karen had an expansion to sell. I did not sign. I took pictures of the form, the guard, the closed barrier, the camera pole, the concrete, the wiring, the trucks, the signs, the trench, and the vehicles waiting behind me. Then I turned around and drove the long way around through a rough pasture track that had not been used in years. It took 25 minutes, scratched both sides of my truck, and nearly got me stuck in a low spot. By the time I reached the barn, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the effort of not doing something stupid. That night, I laid every document on my kitchen table: deed, easement, survey, old emails, road maintenance receipts, gravel invoices, photos of my father building the culvert, and the access sticker form Karen wanted me to sign. The guardhouse looked official. The barrier arm looked permanent. The sign looked final. But my father had left me something stronger than all of that: a recorded deed. And the next morning, I finally called a real estate attorney. My attorney asked one question before anything else: "Do you have the original easement language?" I did. Not a summary, not a scanned paragraph. The full recorded document with legal description, signatures, exhibits, roadmap, and restrictions. I emailed it to him before our first meeting. He called me back 20 minutes later. His voice was calm, but I could hear the shift. He said, "They have a problem." The easement was clearer than even I remembered. It granted limited, non-exclusive passage over a specific strip of the private road for designated access purposes connected to the original Silver Ridge development. It expressly prohibited permanent structures, gates, barriers, access control devices, relocation, expansion, commercial use beyond the stated purpose, and any interference with the grantor's full use of the road. The grantor was my father. I was his successor. That meant Karen had not just irritated me. She had violated the document that allowed the HOA to use the road at all. My attorney told me not to touch the guardhouse, not to block the road, not to argue with the guards, and not to threaten contractors. Evidence first, enforcement second. So I built the file. I requested updated county parcel maps, the subdivision plat, road records, and all recorded easements tied to Silver Ridge. I pulled the permit portal and searched for the guardhouse, electrical work, access control system, grading, concrete pad, barrier arm, signage, drainage modification, and entrance conversion. Nothing matched. There were planning references to Silver Ridge West, but no approved permit authorizing a permanent guardhouse on my private road. No electrical permit for the wiring I saw. No traffic control approval. No fire access approval. No recorded amended easement. No written consent from me. Then I hired a licensed surveyor. He came out with GPS equipment, old plats, and a look on his face that said he had seen too many people build first and read later. He marked the road boundaries, easement strip, shoulder, fence line, and location of the new structure. His report was brutal. The guardhouse pad, barrier arm foundation, keypad post, camera pole, and trench were all within my private road parcel. They were not on HOA common area. They were not within any expanded, recorded access zone. The barrier arm physically obstructed the road. The cameras monitored beyond the easement area. The concrete pad altered drainage along the shoulder. I sent the survey report to my attorney. He asked for marketing materials next. That was easy. Silver Ridge West had a website. On it, the developer described a secure, private west entrance, controlled community access, luxury expansion lots, and improved resident flow. The site map showed my road as the entrance. The guardhouse rendering looked almost exactly like the one sitting in the middle of my lane. There was also a brochure. I found it through a realtor's listing packet. The brochure said Silver Ridge West's $11 million expansion would include gated access through the western security entrance, enhanced privacy, and direct connection to nature trails. Direct connection. Through my road. I printed every page. I recorded the website with a screen capture. I downloaded the site plan. Then I searched county meeting records and found a planning discussion where Silver Ridge representatives described the west entrance as an access improvement based on existing easement rights. There was no mention that the easement prohibited permanent structures. No mention that I had objected. No mention that the road owner had refused consent. My old emails became critical. Months earlier, I had warned Karen in writing that no construction or gate control was authorized. I attached the easement. I said the HOA had no permission to use the road for Silver Ridge West. That meant they could not claim surprise. My attorney drafted 3 letters. The first was a preservation notice. It ordered the HOA, developer, contractor, and security company to preserve all emails, plans, permits, invoices, board minutes, legal opinions, access representations, marketing materials, and communications about the road. The second was a demand letter. It stated that the guardhouse and related infrastructure violated the recorded easement, trespassed on my property, obstructed my access, exceeded the scope of passage rights, and created unauthorized security control over private land. The third went to county planning, code enforcement, the fire marshal, and the permit office. It included the deed, easement, photos, survey, and request for immediate inspection. Then he made one more call, to the title company reviewing Silver Ridge West. I did not know that mattered until he explained it. If an $11 million expansion depends on an access route, title and lender review need to confirm the legal right to use that access. If the access is disputed, prohibited, obstructed, unpermitted, or beyond the easement scope, the entire project can become uninsurable or unfinanceable. In other words, Karen's guardhouse was not just a trespass. It was a defect in the project. For a few days, nothing visible happened. The booth stayed up. The guard kept stopping vehicles. Karen sent another email saying my attorney was escalating unnecessarily. The developer's lawyer said the matter was being reviewed. Then, on Friday morning, a county inspector parked beside the guardhouse. He walked around it slowly. He photographed the concrete. He looked at the barrier arm. He read the easement. Then he placed a bright orange stop work order on the guardhouse window. I stood by my truck and watched it happen. For the first time since I had come home and seen that booth in my road, I felt the weight shift. Karen tried to remove the stop work order. Not physically. She was too careful for that. She tried to talk it away. She arrived while the inspector was still there, dressed like she was ready for a board meeting, not a construction violation. She told him the guardhouse was an HOA safety improvement. She said the community had relied on this access for years. She said residents needed controlled entry because Silver Ridge West would bring more traffic and higher security expectations. The inspector listened. Then he asked for the permit. Karen looked at the contractor. The contractor looked at the developer representative. The developer representative said the permit package was in process. The inspector said construction was not allowed to proceed based on a permit package in process. Then he asked for proof of landowner authorization for a permanent structure. Karen said the easement granted access. My attorney, who had arrived by then, handed him the recorded easement and pointed to the clause. No permanent structures or obstructions. No security control. No interference with grantor access. No expansion beyond stated purpose without written consent. The inspector read it. So did the developer representative. That was the first time I saw panic in his face. Because Karen could argue with me. She could dismiss my emails. She could tell residents I was being unreasonable. But the easement language did not care about her narrative. It was plain. The HOA could pass. It could not build. That distinction killed the guardhouse. But the legal problem went deeper. The fire marshal reviewed the barrier arm and said it had not been approved as part of an emergency access system. The road width, turn radius, override system, NOx access, and emergency procedure had not been properly reviewed. Because the barrier controlled a private road, also used for ranch access, it created access concerns beyond the HOA's authority. Code enforcement flagged the electrical work. Planning flagged the entrance conversion. The drainage office flagged the concrete pad and trench because runoff from the shoulder had been altered without review. By the end of that week, the booth was not a security improvement anymore. It was an unpermitted, permanent obstruction on private property beyond the scope of an easement, tied to an expansion that had represented the road as usable access. Then the title issue hit. My attorney received a letter from the title company acknowledging the access dispute and stating that it could affect review of Silver Ridge West's project documents. The lender followed with a request for clarification of legal access rights. The developer was asked to provide recorded authority for the west entrance. They could not. They had Karen's confidence. They had board approval. They had marketing materials. They had contractor invoices. They had maybe a legal memo somewhere saying the easement could support continued access. But they did not have my consent. They did not have an amended easement. They did not have the right to build a guardhouse. They did not have the right to transform limited passage into a controlled main entrance for an $11 million expansion. That was the moment the developer turned on the HOA. Their attorney sent a letter to Silver Ridge stating that the developer had relied on representations that the west access route was legally available for expansion infrastructure. The letter reserved claims for delays, redesign costs, buyer impact, financing disruption, and damages caused by inaccurate access representations. Karen forwarded none of that to residents at first. Instead, she sent a message saying the west entrance had encountered temporary permitting delays caused by a neighboring property owner. My attorney replied with documents, not insults. Documents, the deed, the easement clause, the survey, the stop work order, the title company access review notice, the developer's reservation of rights. Someone leaked them into the Silver Ridge residents' Facebook group. That changed everything. Residents began asking why the board approved a guardhouse on a road it did not own, why money had been spent before permits were issued, why the easement language was not checked, why the expansion was marketed with a west entrance if the landowner had refused permission. Karen's answer was always the same: existing access rights. But once people read the easement, that phrase lost its power. Existing access rights did not mean unlimited access rights. Existing access rights did not mean construction rights. Existing access rights did not mean $11 million expansion entrance rights. A right to pass is not a right to build a checkpoint. That became the sentence my attorney used in every conversation. A right to pass is not a right to build a checkpoint. And once the county, title company, lender, developer, and residents understood that, Karen's guardhouse became exactly what it had always been: a very expensive trespass. The removal happened on a Tuesday morning. A sheriff's deputy was there to keep the peace. Code enforcement was there to document compliance. The county inspector was there with a clipboard. My surveyor was there to mark the boundaries again. My attorney stood beside me near the fence. Karen stood across the road with two board members, arms crossed, face tight, saying almost nothing. The contractor cut power to the booth first. Then they removed the barrier arm. I watched that arm come down and felt my shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. After that came the keypad pedestal, the camera pole, the wiring, and the temporary security sign. The concrete pad took longer. They had to break it out carefully because the county required them to restore drainage along the road shoulder. Every chunk of concrete loaded into the truck sounded like an answer. Karen tried to tell the deputy that I was blocking necessary community infrastructure. The deputy asked if she had a court order. She did not. My attorney reminded everyone that the HOA was allowed only limited passage under the easement, once the obstruction was removed, and only within its lawful scope. Karen said the HOA reserved all rights. My attorney said so did I. That afternoon, the county issued a correction notice requiring restoration of the road shoulder, drainage repair, removal of unauthorized electrical work, and confirmation that no future construction would occur without permits and landowner authorization. The guardhouse was gone, but the $11 million problem remained. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled 3 nights later. I did not want to attend. I had already won the practical fight. The road was open. The obstruction was removed. But my attorney said Karen was still blaming me for the expansion delay. And if she was going to talk about my road in front of residents, the deed needed to be in the room. So I went. The clubhouse was packed. Residents stood along the walls. A few future buyers were there too. People who had placed deposits on Silver Ridge West lots because the west entrance was part of the sales pitch. The developer representative sat at the front table, no longer beside Karen, but noticeably apart from her. Karen opened by saying the board remained committed to Silver Ridge West and that the access issue had been caused by an unreasonable neighboring landowner exploiting technical language. Technical language. That was what she called a recorded property restriction. Then the developer representative spoke. He said the project was suspended pending legal access review. Financing could not proceed until the entrance issue was resolved. Certain buyer commitments were being reassessed. Redesigning the entrance could require additional land acquisition, engineering, drainage approval, and county review. The delay was material. A resident asked what material meant. He said, "It means the project as presented cannot proceed on the current access assumptions." That was a polite way of saying Karen had sold them an entrance she did not have. My attorney then presented the documents. He showed the deed. He showed the easement. He highlighted the words, "No permanent structures." Then, "No obstruction." Then, "No security control." Then, "No expansion without written consent." He showed my email warning Karen months earlier. He showed photos of the guardhouse. He showed the stop work order. He showed the survey. He did not have to say much. The timeline said enough. Karen had notice. Karen ignored it. Karen approved construction. Karen caused the violation. Karen triggered the title and lender problem. Residents started asking questions. Who authorized the contractor? How much had been spent? Had the HOA attorney reviewed the easement? Did Karen disclose my objection? Did the developer rely on board representations? Would dues increase because of legal claims? Would buyers sue? Would the expansion die? Karen tried to answer all of them with phrases: safety improvement, community benefit, long-standing access, modernization, shared infrastructure. Then a man in the third row stood up and said, "Can someone just answer this? Did we build a guardhouse on his road without permission?" The room went quiet. The HOA attorney leaned toward the microphone and said the association was reviewing all facts. That was the answer. Everyone heard it. The developer representative confirmed that the original west entrance plan was no longer viable without a new recorded agreement, which I was under no obligation to provide. He also confirmed that the project's $11 million financing package had been paused, frozen, dead unless they found another route. Karen looked smaller after that. Not sorry, just cornered. The meeting ended with the board voting to suspend all Silver Ridge West access spending, cooperate with the developer's review, and commission an independent investigation into how the guardhouse was approved. Karen voted against the investigation. That vote mattered later, because by then, residents no longer saw her as the person protecting community safety. They saw her as the person who built a checkpoint on someone else's road and called it progress. The settlement came after the developer threatened litigation. That was what finally made the HOA realistic. They could ignore me when I was one landowner with a deed. They could argue with my attorney. They could delay. They could call it a misunderstanding. But when an $11 million expansion started collapsing, and the developer put damages in writing, the board suddenly discovered the value of compromise. The HOA agreed to pay for full removal of the guardhouse infrastructure, restoration of the road, drainage repair, gravel replacement, survey costs, attorney fees, and a settlement for the period my access was obstructed. They also signed a recorded acknowledgement, stating that the easement did not permit permanent structures, access control devices, gates, barriers, commercial expansion use, or interference with my full use of the private road. That document mattered almost as much as the money, because from then on, anyone searching the property records would see the truth immediately. No HOA control, no guardhouse, no expansion entrance, no more pretending the west access was theirs. Silver Ridge West did not recover, not in the form Karen had promised. Without my road, the developer had to redesign the entrance. That meant engineering, drainage studies, traffic review, new land negotiations, and major cost increases. Some pre-lot buyers pulled out. The lender never revived the original package. The developer eventually canceled the agreement with the HOA and reserved claims for misrepresentation and delay. The $11 million expansion did not die because I hated progress. It died because Karen built it on a legal assumption she never had the right to make. Residents were furious. Not all of them cared about my road. Some only cared because the project failed. But enough of them understood the danger. Their board president had spent HOA resources, exposed them to legal claims, and damaged a major development deal because she thought authority could be created by confidence. Karen tried to survive the special meeting. She said she had acted in good faith. She said security was a legitimate concern. She said the road had been used for years. She said nobody could have predicted I would weaponize old deed language. Old deed language. That was my father's signature she was talking about. The residents voted her out. 2 board members resigned within the month. The HOA adopted a new policy requiring title review, attorney approval, permit confirmation, and written landowner consent before any project involving roads, easements, gates, utility access, security structures, or development infrastructure. A good rule, a late one. As for me, I kept the road. I patched the shoulder where the concrete had been. I regraded the drainage ditch. I replaced the sign Karen's contractor had zip-tied their warning notice to. The new sign is larger. It says, "Private road. Deeded access only. No HOA control. No structures. No barriers." Some people think signs like that are unfriendly. Maybe they are. But a friendly sign did not stop a guardhouse from appearing in the middle of my road. Sometimes clarity is kinder than politeness. The first evening after everything was restored, I drove slowly down the road to the back pasture. No guard, no barrier arm, no camera pointed at my truck, just gravel under the tires, dust behind me, cedar trees along the fence, and the same bend in the road where my father used to stop and check the culvert after rain. I parked near the well house and sat there for a while. It would be easy to say I felt victorious. I did not. I felt tired. Tired that something so obvious had taken lawyers, inspectors, surveyors, deputies, meetings, and money to prove. Tired that a recorded deed had to fight a marketing brochure. Tired that Karen could make a private road feel unsafe simply by acting like she owned it. But I also felt grateful. Grateful my father had written the easement carefully. Grateful I had kept the documents. Grateful I recorded instead of reacting. Grateful I did not give Karen the scene she wanted. Because if I had ripped down that barrier myself, the story would have been about my temper. Since I waited, documented, and used the law, the story became about their trespass. That difference saved me. So if an HOA, developer, contractor, or neighbor ever tells you they have access rights over your road, do not stop at the word access. Read the document. Read every limit. Passage is not ownership. An easement is not a blank check. A board vote is not a deed. A permit application is not permission. And a guardhouse, no matter how official it looks, is just a box if it sits on land where it does not belong. Karen thought private land had to adapt. She was wrong. Private land has records, and when those records are clear, even an $11 million expansion can be stopped by one sentence in a deed.